The S&P 500 remains in a risk-on environment. So there's still good chance we go up and hit the upper channel line that I've been talking about. Maybe we even overthrow it, but again, we do go up and hit it, could stall with negative divergence forming on the RSI in the weekly time frame and on the awesome oscillator. S&P trend is still positive at this point. Bearish, we saw signals begin to turn back to bullish. Momentum is bearish. Trend signals remain bullish for the most part. We remain in a risk-on environment. We could still go higher. If we revert to a risk-off environment, we start going down. Friday's low, taking out the 50-period moving average, then would be bearish, and we would see trend signals begin to turn back to bearish. They remain bullish. Momentum is bearish. Again, will momentum turn back to bullish and the swing trend signals remain bullish, or will momentum remain bearish and the swing trend signals begin to turn bearish? A couple of them have, but most of them remain bullish. Again, I think we have divergences on the RSI and the awesome oscillator here in the weekly time frame. We've got a green bar. Could still have a red ugly week before the weekends if signals begin to turn bearish, and if we take out our 10-week moving average, that would be very bearish. Possible we buy a little bit more time. Swing trend signals in the daily time frame can remain positive. This divergence is forming, and again, MACD has it as well. It hasn't pushed, the MACD line hasn't pushed above the signal line, but it's forming there. You've got it on the stochastic forming. It's a weekly chart. We get 1 bar per week. So signals the week could be very bearish or very bullish, depending on if we take out the support levels I'll be mentioning in this video. Whether we buy a little bit more time or whether we see this begin to play out. Again, I told you we had a possible hanging man last week. It would have to be confirmed. We'd have to start dropping below it. We buy a little time and rally into the Fed meeting in the next week and a half, and then turn maybe with the CPI or with the Fed meeting to get the new projections out of the Fed for economy and funds rate. How many cuts are we going to get? How many are they expecting 2024 and 2025? So again, it would be a big market mover, but this is something I'm watching. True for the NASDAQ, and again, if you hold above the 10-week moving average, you could still go higher, but again, we start turning down and taking it out and completing this divergence, then all she wrote. Momentum continues to be negative for the S&P, and oscillator continues to have red bars. My guess is we're going to see green bars appear and end up forming a negative divergence and probably push to a new high. But like I said, if we end up getting rejection here at the red dots and the upper boundary of the cloud, then look out below. Again, momentum is still negative. The trend is bullish. Momentum switch back to bullish, or will trend signals turn bearish? Daily chart of the S&P is true for the NASDAQ. And again, NASDAQ bounced just above the 50 period. You got red awesome oscillator bars. My guess is you're probably going to see green and form a divergence and go up to the upper channel. S&P in the upper boundary of the rising wedge on NASDAQ. But again, if we start losing the 20 period, we start seeing the 10 period act as resistance in the upper boundary of the cloud, bets are off. There's risk of getting a bigger drop if you take out the 20 and the 50 period moving average. I still think we're going to go higher, but again, momentum is negative. Trend signals begin to turn bearish. All bets are off. It's close but no cigar with the trend lines I've been talking about. But if we start seeing green bars here, I'll be watching to see if we can get back above the 10 period moving averages, flip these clouds to bullish here in the daily time frame. We got today, it's again a possible hanging man or a bottoming tail, another bottoming tail, but it's a black candlestick. Sometimes black candlesticks mark major tops or short-term tops. We got it over here, we got it over here, we got it right here, and again, this was short-term. This was a bigger top over here, although we went 3 points higher. So again, I'll be watching what becomes of this candlestick. Attempted to fill the gap, close but no cigar, so we'll be watching. Can continue to climb or even pull back and continue to climb. Again, you still have the possibility of this larger divergence developing on the RSI here in the daily time frame and on the weekly chart, although it could be done even if we go down, because we've already formed a divergence right here to a higher high on the weekly chart. So again, I do think that a possible double top or head and shoulders could be under construction. Whether the head formation is done remains to be seen, or whether we're forming it right now, or we end up with, again, a double top that has kind of a balance where the second peak goes a little bit higher than the first peak. So we'll be watching. Again, right now we're stalling at the momentum cloud and the 10-period moving average. 10 is still above the 20, but we bounced off this 50-period moving average. Thing, if we do go higher, the MACD down here could end up forming a divergence in this most recent price action before all is said and done. We'll be watching, do we make an attempt to rally into the Fed meeting that very day on June 12th? We'll get the CPI before the Fed, and later that day we'll have the Fed. Week we're going to get the jobs report on Friday, the private payrolls in the middle of the week. Pretty much doing the same thing. Again, getting a candle with a bottoming tail or a hanging man, stalling just under the 10-period moving average here with the momentum cloud directly overhead. Again, still have a gap up here that hasn't been filled that we still may end up filling, but there might be more work to be done. We came down towards the 50 here, but didn't reach it. Still may come back towards this trend line right here. Just same thing on the S&P. I've talked about these trend lines over the weekend. We end up getting a bigger sell-off. We'll be watching to see, do trend signals remain bullish or do they turn bearish? We can rally. Does momentum flip back to bullish? Right now it's bearish. That too has that possible head and shoulders pattern. We didn't reach the upper Bollinger Band here. We still may end up doing it before all is said and done. But again, possible head and shoulders in the daily chart, and maybe the bearish engulfing's it, and we end up turning down and then form a right shoulder. But we got to see the trend signals turn bearish if that's going to be the case. These MACDs have rolled over. Will that give us a bigger sell-off, or do they end up forming divergences? And we go up and hit the trend lines there on the weekly charts, that rising wedge that I've been talking about on NASDAQ weekly chart. Never did reach it. We still may. And again, I'll be watching this upper boundary of the rising wedge. The diversions could be done. If we start turning down, then maybe, again, you come back down and you start forming this head and shoulders here. But this is we're going to make it up to this level, but you're forming the diversion, so it may not be done yet. And again, if it is able to make it up to the trend line, if NASDAQ's able to make it up there, then we'll be watching. Our sellers going to be lurking at that trend line. Again, these divergences have called tops and bottoms and corrections. Over here we had this divergence that gave us this 8+ point correction over here after the July peak. The bottom over here, the bullish divergence over here at the 2021 top. So divergence is going to be no different. It's going to produce a reversal. The question is it starting now, or do we buy a little bit more time and still hit this upper boundary? And it's not quite done yet, but I do think it's going to play out. Maybe it already is if we start seeing more signals turn bearish. Same thing for the S&P. Again, it fell short of the trend line there. It's close but no cigar, but I think you got a shot at reaching this level, maybe even overthrowing it and redefining the upper boundary. But as I've said, these divergences are going to play out as they have. The question right now is the divergence done? Again, I still think you got a shot at that upper boundary, but if trend signals start turning bearish, then forget it. Both momentum and trend signals bearish. What happens? Here it is a little closer. The divergence is either completing right here, right now, or we go a little higher and complete it, and then I think you're going to come back and take out your 20-week moving average. And again, likely form a head and shoulders or a double top pattern, likely similar to this here. Broke below the 50-period moving average, the green line right here. It broke down from a rising wedge. It has to be able to get back above the trending cloud, back above the 50 if we're going to get a bigger rally. Down towards the 200 and it bounced. If we go back and test the 200 again and even take out this low and move towards this trend line, you might still see a divergence develop here on the RSI and on the MACD and still try to bounce off that trend line right here. But MACD is still negative. You could still end up forming a divergence. You don't have to, but you could. NASDAQ 60-minute chart. And again, 50 is still above the 200, but price is below the 50. So again, momentum is bearish. The trend is still bullish. You start taking out 200 and the 50 starts crossing below it, then the trend turns bearish in the 60-minute time frame. The divergences on the RSI gave us this sell-off, back to test the 200 here in the 60-minute time frame, back to test the 50 periods in the daily. And same thing, if the S&P goes back down, we have this trend line in the 200 below. We did bounce off of it. NASDAQ was just shy of it, but S&P did bounce off of it. We've got this trend line. If we go back down, you got to be able to clear the trending cloud. You got to be able to clear the resistance zone if we're going to try to go higher. If we end up turning back down, the RSI will come down and likely form a divergence. We'll be watching that trend line if that is in fact the case. Please support the channel with the link directly below. That allows me to be able to provide you this information. If you indicators like the charts, please let me know that by supporting the channel. I do need your help in order to make it work. Please consider partnering with me by supporting the channel today. Take a moment to do that. I would really appreciate it. If you follow the link below to take you to a secured site, you can donate any amount you want, recurring donation, and if you do that, I thank you. Consider supporting the channel today. Thank you for your consideration for that. The VIX was up about 1.5%, and again, the VIX was down more than 10% there on Friday, predicting an update in the next two trading sessions. Well, we got it today on the S&P 500. After some volatility, we went higher, gapping higher, went lower. We rebounded, and we had a gain by the end of the day. So again, the VIX correctly, the last two predictions that the VIX has made, got it right. 85% chance of an update in the next 2 days. It got it. Now, again, we don't know if that just means a bounce or a bottom. Just be a bounce, and then the selling may resume. Right now, the VIX was only up 1.5%, but again, it's come back here towards the gap fill area here, and we attempt to rally. We may get a bigger throwback into a back test of the bullish falling wedge. Be able to get above the 50-period moving average for volatility to return on the S&P 500. We have turned off the 50-period moving average. With that, stochastics rolling over and MACD remains negative. So again, if that is the case, the stock market has a chance of still going up and hitting the upper channel lines or even overthrowing them if swing trend signals can remain bullish. Momentum turns back to bullish, currently negative. Now quickly, I just want to talk to you about risk reward. We're back up at extremes. We were just below the upper channel line. We still may attempt to reach it, but as we start the week off, we're rolling over. Now that may change at the end of the week. We had a down week last week. We broke the winning streak. Again, it's possible we have a divergence right here if we see trend signals begin to turn bearish, but start taking out the 200 periods on the 60-minute charts and so forth. Attempt to rebound before the week ends. The signal may get canceled out. If the Dow attempts to find a bottom, it may attempt a counter trend, a larger counter trend. All is said and done, and we still may see the S&P try to move to new highs. We'll be watching what does it look like by the end of the week. Do we get a recovery, or last week's sell-off began last Friday with the bottoming tail on the daily chart there. Just rally up here and attempt to fill the gap and then resume the selling pressure. Again, the S&P is likely going to make a new high. The last two sessions, again, it's been buy the dip. Bottoming tails. Today on the 5-minute chart, we had a gap higher. It was an intraday gap and trap. We went back and we tested the 200 as we did the 50. The 50 got back above the 200 period here in the 5-minute time frame. We bounced off the 200, forming a bullish divergence right here, and we rebounded into the end of the session to close positive by about 7 points. Again, we went back, filled the gap. There's a gap and trap. I told you, again, we could come back and test this low. The moving averages get a bullish cross. I talked about that over the weekend. Again, likely going to rally into the FOMC meeting a week and a half from right now. With last week's low, we had come down to that 200 period moving average on the 60-minute chart, right towards this trend line, just right above it there. And again, I told you we can go back and test it, get a higher low or a higher high, a higher low or a lower low, and hit that trend line. Again, it was this divergence that gave us this sell-off back to the 200 period. The 50 is still above the 200 period. We actually closed back above it. Momentum signals had turned bearish, but again, the swing trend signals, majority of them remain positive. Bottoming tail there on Friday, we have a couple of swing trend signals turning bearish, but the majority of them remain bullish. What we'll be watching is here on the MACD, do we end up rolling over and forming a divergence here, or do we get back in positive territory? We're right here at the center line, and if we get back in positive territory, Again, do we go up and do we challenge this high up here and the lower high here that's set up that makes up the resistance zone? Continue to bounce off of VWAP support from these highs over here and these lows on over here. In this area, we hit the VWAP support levels. We bounced. We got the bottoming tail there on Friday. We came back. We tested that level. So far, it has held. Again, just rallying back up to fill the gap right here, which again we came just shy of. Did fill it on an intraday basis, but what I'm going to watch is to see, do we get a lower high there, or do we have to go back and test this level and maybe the trend line? And again, we didn't quite reach the trend line. Maybe we reach the trend line of support and then go higher. I think we're likely going to go higher, but it could play out that way. Or again, we could just build momentum and continue to go and try to move above this high right here. Remember, the bearish engulfing here, you got a confirmation right there, but we never got the follow through. Well, momentum signals have turned bearish. See that right here again. This is showing momentum. It flipped right here. It's back to red. Trend is still bullish. We're still bouncing off of key support levels for our trending signals. So are we going to get something like what we had over here with momentum where it turns back up, or will it remain negative and flip some of the swing trend signals to bearish? I have the trend. It's still bullish. We're bouncing off of it. Here I have the momentum. It's bearish right now. My guess is we're going to eventually make our way back up to test that upper boundary of the channel. Do it immediately or pull back to the trend line and do it. Watching to see if the trend signals, the majority of them, remain bullish. Bring it up close. You can see, again, the trend is bullish. Momentum is bearish for right now. The momentum line is bearish. The rainbow cloud is bearish. These are short-term momentum signals. Momentum line here still bearish. Swing trend line is still bullish. It had briefly turned bearish, but it turned right back to bullish. Balance of power remains positive. Does momentum remain negative? Start turning swing trend signals bearish, or do the swing trend signals remain bullish and momentum starts turning back to bullish? And then we get one more push higher. Bring up the momentum cloud. The momentum cloud, along with the momentum line, bearish. We got to be able to clear these levels, have the momentum line turn back to bullish if we're going to go higher. Turn back down. Again, we got the rising trend line on the 60-minute chart. Be watching and support levels with VWAP support, the 50-day moving average. And again, this is where the support is coming in with the swing trend signals around that 50-day moving average or just above it. Looking at the bars reflecting momentum, they remain red, along with the momentum line, but the trend is still bullish. If we start dropping below the cloud and below this line right here, then signals would start turning back to bearish. If we hold above these levels, we can go higher or continue to consolidate in a sideways range. The momentum did go negative here. It's got to turn back up if we're going to go higher. Again, here's the upper boundary of the channel right here. Even overthrow it and redefine it. If we only come up here to fill the gap, or we just filled it on an intraday basis, and again, we start taking these levels out, that would be bearish. Start closing below Friday's low. So we've got to be able to see the low 5,200 area hold and the high 5,100 area hold here if we're going to go higher. Still have a bearish signal with momentum here. So again, changes, and again, we're going sideways. If it remains bearish, then there's still risk of coming down and taking out these levels and getting a bigger sell-off. But again, the trend is still bullish. Momentum is bearish. The candlesticks are red. The momentum line is red, and we have a red sell signal there with the orange warning of a possible turn that we're either going sideways or down. It did back over here, but over here, it turned bearish, but then it reverted right back to bullish, showing again we are going sideways. Again, this is an important level of support right here. Most trend signals are bullish. If we can flip momentum back to bullish, we can go higher. If momentum flips the trend signals to bearish, then we can get a bigger sell-off. Our 100 period moving average is down here. Got to hold above that. The line here representing the trend The cloud has to remain bullish if we're going to go higher. You start turning trend signals bearish, then we're going to head back towards the 100 period moving average. My guess is that we're going to head to the upper channel. There might be more work to be done here, but that's my guess. If swing trend signals start turning back to bearish, then that will change. Momentum bearish and the swing trend signals bearish. Right now, they're mixed. So here's the bars reflecting momentum. When we started to go higher, they started turning green. Started going lower, they started turning red. So this is telling us, again, we're either going sideways or we're going down. Now, if we start seeing some green, but let me show you the bars reflecting the trend. This is momentum here. Now here, the bars reflect the trend. And again, they started warning over here. We got a warning sign of a possible top right here. And then we got the orange bars showing, hey, maybe things are going to change with the trend. We took out this line reflecting the trend, and we started to see the red bars. We ended up hitting the 20-week moving average in the weekly time frame, and I told you it's possible we have a bottom there. Go back up, fill the gap, or gap at 5,200, or try to make a new high. Up seeing as bars as far as the trend turned back to bullish. We got back above the line again. Signals flip back to bullish. Bars reflecting trend turned back to green, but then they started turning orange and red here again. Now they're back to green, and again, this is telling us either we're going up now or sideways, reflecting the trend. Again, likely reflecting a sideways kind of we pull back, and now we're back up into this trading range, and we're just kind of in this kind of range here. We would need to see the momentum, bars reflecting momentum, turn back to green. This is going to be validated. Risk of it being a little hanging man and more work to be done here, or a bigger sell-off. Like I said, my guess is we're going to go up and hit upper boundary channel in all likelihood. But I wanted to show you the momentum. The trend here is turning back to green, and the momentum, I should say the bar reflecting the trend turning back to green, and momentum, the bar is still bearish. So watching to see, can momentum signals begin to turn back to bullish? Come back down, we start taking this level out. Again, the cloud here, and again, going to be bearish. We bounce off these levels, that's going to be bullish. Again, the balance of power is still positive. So again, we'll be watching, does it remain positive and everything starts turning back to bullish as far as momentum? Swing trend signals remain bullish, or do we start taking out these levels and we start seeing balance of power go negative? So nothing's really changed. Again, momentum signals are still bearish, and the trend signals, for the most part, are bullish. Now, I do want to say again, over here with the bearish engulfing, I get signs of distribution with my critical mass cloud telling me that, hey, we're seeing signs of distribution up at the highs as a divergence formed. We never did get a sell signal like what we had over here, or a bottoming signal like what we had over here. It never showed up yet. Doesn't have to. Not every reversal produces a turning signal, but more often than not, it happens. So the fact that it didn't happen there, again, could be suggesting we still, again, may make an attempt to rally into the FOMC meeting, or just after it, just before it, up into the upper end of the channel on the S&P 500. Most of the S&P trend signals remain bullish here. Momentum is showing we're going sideways. The trend is still bullish. We still have bullish signals. We've not gotten bearish signals yet for the trend, but momentum is negative for the moment. The cloud is still bullish. The swing trend line is still bullish. Oscillators are still in positive territory. We're probably going to form a negative divergence on the RSI in the daily time frame. We probably see some of these signals end up turning back up. Again, support levels can hold. The sell-off might be over from last Friday's low. If it is, we might head up towards here. Now again, if we start taking out the levels of support I'm talking about, then we can go lower. And again, you've got possibly the peak right here for either a double top or a head and shoulders pattern. My guess is we're still going to try to make it up here, but like I said, it's bearish. Most swing trend signals are still bullish. They're turning bearish too, then maybe that's all she wrote. over the weekend that, hey, maybe we just come back up here, fill the gap. It was close but no cigar today. Did fill it on an intraday basis, but again, still a possibility if we end up turning back down. But we still have the trend line right here, which is on the 60-minute chart. We didn't quite reach it. If we form a divergence on the 60-minute chart, again, we still may attempt to do that and then still even come back up here. So I'll be watching to see how it unfolds. Still think you've got a shot at a head and shoulders here, and I still think there's a strong possibility we're going to make our way to this upper boundary before all is said and done. We'll see what happens. And most of my trending signals remain bullish. There's just a couple that have turned bearish. Most of them found support with Friday's low, and the majority of oscillators still remain positive. So if these signals start turning back to bearish, then maybe that's it. Lower, but if they remain bullish, we can still try to go higher again towards this trend line right here, or even overthrow it and redefine it. If I bring it up close again, here I have momentum in the trend. The trend is still bullish. Momentum is flatlined. Okay, momentum is negative while the trend is still bullish. If the trend turns bearish with momentum being negative, then that's going to take prices lower. If we can get momentum turning back to bullish, then we can head up towards the trend line or even overthrow it. I have a couple of signals that have turned bearish. The majority of them remain bullish. Which will turn? Will momentum turn back up, or will the swing trend signals begin to all turn down? If momentum turns back to bullish, this signal will likely turn back to bullish very quickly. If momentum remains bearish, we take out the support levels I've been talking about, look out below. More swing trend signals will turn. Trending signal still bullish here. Right here, we've seen momentum shift. The little arrows telling me momentum is shifted, but we're bouncing off the lower end of the cloud. Again, do we end up getting something that looks like this, where we go sideways, where we bounced off the cloud there as well, but eventually signals reverted back to bullish? Or do we start taking out the cloud? So again, I've got a mixed bag. Momentum signals are bearish. The trend is still bullish. The oscillator is still bullish. It's ticking up. Again, I think you're going to likely end up going higher and seeing a negative divergence develop. But like I said, if signals start turning bearish, the swing trend signals, then we're going to get a bigger sell-off. Now, support at the 50-period moving average is holding. Again, more trending signals still remain bullish at this time. So again, I think it's by the dip, unless we start taking out this level, the lows from Friday and the 50-period on the daily. Again, on the S&P 500, the cloud is still bullish. If it starts flipping back to bearish, we'll get a bigger sell-off. If it remains bullish, we can go up to the upper channel line. Critical mass line, again, showing we're going sideways. Again, we had dropped below it, got back above it. It's going flatlined. It's still bullish at this point. So again, it's showing that momentum is negative, but it's still blue, showing that the trend is still positive. If it starts turning red, then there's risk of changing the trend, dropping below it, turning red, dropping below it, getting something that looks like over here, where again, we saw a sell-off, we got back above it, and then we dropped back below it. Then there's risk of the bearish engulfing being the peak, and we get a bigger sell-off, and the sell-off could take us all the way back down here to the lows there in April. Support levels I'm showing you hold. The swing trend signals remain positive. We could still attempt to go higher, so we'll be watching to see how it unfolds. Is this a hanging man, or are these bottoming tails? More work to be done going higher, or is this nothing more than a counter trend? We'll be looking for clues, but right now it's negative. Swing trend signals are mostly positive. Now, I warned you we had distribution taking place up at the top. Again, just like we did back over here, we started seeing selling into the rally. We saw the same thing. Still go higher. If we don't trigger a sell signal, we're still on a buy signal here. Trend is still bullish. Momentum is flatlined with the critical mass cloud. As we have the rally, we are seeing a distribution. If we do go higher, again, I think we could complete that divergence on the RSI in the weekly time frame, then begin to reverse. Possible it's already done. We've already moved to a new high. Now, is our swing trend signals going to remain bullish, and we go higher, or are they going to turn bearish and go back and test the April low? Critical mass, cloud 2.0, the, again, signal is still bullish as far as the trend, but momentum is bearish. we have red bars showing negative momentum, and we've gone flatlined, which means we're either going down or sideways. We went down over here, everything remained bearish, and the signal flipped to bearish over here. We went sideways, things reverted back to bullish, and you began to see the green bars once again, and critical mass began to rise. So again, we'll see most of the swing trend signals are bullish.